And you worked your way right into that situation and got exactly what you wanted. And you did what you did. And you would have kept doing it. Because as I recall, when the victim's mother managed to work her way through her own personal problems and asked you to return her daughter to her, you resisted. You went so far as to filing an action to, I think, get custody, if I remember right, okay? And then ask for visitation. You didn't want to give up. You didn't want to give up your diabolical situation that you had going. Now, there's nothing in that mitigation report that I read that even begins to explain why you would do what you did. So while you, Ms. Ragazione has indicated that you've accepted responsibility, in fact, you haven't accepted responsibility. There's nothing in that report, there's nothing in your interview with Ms. Wehagen that tells me that you've accepted responsibility for anything. I don't sense that you're capable, from everything I've read, of accepting responsibility for anything.
Your Honor, may I briefly respond?
What?
May I briefly respond?
Sure.
I do think it's important to point out that in the pre-sentence report, Mr. Bernstein did also indicate that he does feel really bad about what happened. He would take it all back if he could. If he could fix it, he would.
Well, he can't. He can't take it back, and he can't fix it.
Yes, Your Honor, but I do think it's important to point out that he did acknowledge that. He acknowledged that saying sorry is just a word. It doesn't actually change anything. So he has shown insight there. He has shown that he does think about these things, and he is beginning to gain that insight and move forward. I would also like to point out that he did suffer a traumatic brain injury as a teenager as a result of a car accident.
I'm aware of that.
I'm sorry?
I'm aware of that. It's in the report.
Yes, so I do think that was noted in the mitigation report, and that was something that was discussed as kind of explaining in some ways the way that he does present and things of that nature. So I did just want to point those things out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, the car accident and the injury 20, 24, 25 years ago didn't prevent him from hatching this plan and executing this plan to get what he wanted over the course of about 2 to 3 years. So he can't fall back on that excuse that it had something to do with doing why he did what he did. I mean, I think it's the exact opposite. It showed he had the ability to manipulate that girl's mother, to manipulate Kaplowitz, to then point the finger at Kaplowitz, ingratiate himself with the girl's mother, and then repeatedly rape her over a period of time. So there's nothing in that report. Certainly nothing excuses it. I don't think you're insinuating that it excuses anything. But
No, Your
there's
Honor.
nothing in there that explains it.
Well,
There's
my client's
Go ahead.
exactly the opposite. I mean,
Right.
he's certainly saying there is no excuse for his behavior.
Right.
That's correct.
And there's no explanation for it. So, I mean, the report says what it says. But there's certainly no insight as to why he did what he did. Now, the fact is that this young girl, and part of what I received was the victim impact statement penned by the victim's mother, which describes the victim's current situation. And you can be assured that this is never going to leave her mind, ever. She's going to think about this on a daily basis. She's going to have to try to figure out how to live with it. That's the best she can do. And I don't know how she does that. Because just because of you and your selfishness. That's the only reason for it. And then you get to all these images that were on your electronic devices, and you got a whole host of other victims who, if not for people like you, those pictures wouldn't exist. Because of sick minds like you who observe this stuff and peddle this stuff, that's why there's all this stuff that goes on. That's why all those photos exist. And those victims have no control over anything because of people like you. Mr. Gazione, anything further?
Your Honor, I guess I would just, again, refer to my statements previously and just request that the court consider giving Mr. Bernstein the opportunity to participate in programming in the prison and the opportunity to show the parole board at the appropriate time that he is making progress and fashion a sentence accordingly. Thank you.
Ms. Hronik?
Thank you, Your Honor. The state is requesting that the court impose a sentence of life without the possibility of parole on all 3 counts of rape in the 2023 case, consecutive to each other and consecutive to a prison sentence imposed on the 2024 case for the pandering obscenity involving a minor or impaired person. The state would like to point out that the charged conduct for the pandering case was for pictures of the victim of the rape case that were located in the defendant's phone. There were pictures of his rape victim, and that is what constituted the charged conduct in the pandering obscenity case. The state believes that the maximum consecutive sentence on these cases is appropriate for several reasons. The first of those reasons being the serious physical or psychological harm that the victim suffered. She suffered permanent injuries to her vagina and her anus. She was found to have a fully transected hymen, healed hymen cleft, and a near complete absence of anal folds. These injuries were discovered in an exam that was conducted 2 months after the abuse had stopped. She has also been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. That was a diagnosis that she received when she was 7 years old. In addition, these physical or mental injuries were exacerbated by her age. She was 4 years old when the rapes began. She was 6 years old when they ended. She was so young that she had no ability to protect herself. Her physical injuries that I mentioned, the injuries to her vagina and her anus, were the result of a grown man pushing his penis into the vagina and anus of a small child. So her small size exacerbated her injuries. And her post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis will continue to get worse as she gets older. When this was happening, she had no real understanding of what was being done to her. She was too young to be able to have that understanding. And so that mental injury that she suffered was also exacerbated and will continue to be exacerbated by her age. The defendant's relationship with the victim facilitated the offense. The defendant fought to keep the victim from her mother and filed for custody with the courts and won twice. He filed for that custody and he won that custody so that he will be the victim's sole provider, the sole provider of her safety and of her care. For all intents and purposes, he was her parent during this 2-year period. He had complete control over her, and he used that control over her to repeatedly rape her, something he did so often that the victim described it as happening every day. He was only able to commit these crimes because of the unfettered access to the victim that he had fought for and gained by receiving custody. The state does not believe that the defendant feels any genuine remorse. While in the pre-sentence report, he does say all the right words. He says he's truly sorry and he feels ashamed and he accepts full responsibility and he's genuinely remorseful, but he never once acknowledges what he did to the victim. He says he took her in to keep her safe when really he took her in and he used her for his own gratification for 2 years. I think this is specifically a specific example of this is that the last 2 times that he's reported to have raped her, the victim was on the day that her mother came to receive her after mom had won custody back. The defendant does not have any remorse for his actions. The state also does not believe there's any mitigation that has been presented. In the pre-sentence report, the defendant mentioned that he has empathy and clairvoyance. He describes clairvoyance as knowing what other people are thinking and how they feel, which, if that is true, then he knew what the 4-year-old that he was raping was thinking and feeling, and he continued to do it anyway. He also blames the traumatic brain injury from a car accident, but yet was able to heavily encrypt all of his digital devices, so much so that only one or two devices was able to be broken into, and one device took the Secret Service to break into. That's how heavily it was encrypted. Some of the devices have not been broken into. I believe that shows that that traumatic brain injury is not a mitigation at all. He does have the ability to understand what he is doing. The state believes that nothing but a maximum consecutive sentence is enough to punish the defendant for what he did. The 3 counts of rape in the 2023 case do not merge. Each count refers to vaginal penetration, anal penetration, and fellatio. All 3 were separate acts and separate harms that were occurring over the time period of 2020 to 2022. The defendant, in his pre-sentence report, states that he hopes for a sentence of 15 to life so he can get out of prison when he's not too old to have a life that he can enjoy. The defendant destroyed the life that the victim could have and would have had. The damage that has been done to her cannot be understated. The harm that was caused by those 3 counts, the actions that took place in those 3 counts was so great or unusual that no single prison term can adequately reflect the seriousness of his conduct. When the victim describes what happened to her, and she does so clearly without understanding the gravity of what she was saying, when she describes not being able to breathe because her head is being pushed into pillows while she's being raped from behind, when she describes turning around and seeing the defendant filming her while this is happening, when she describes the defendant ejaculating on her face after he forces her to perform fellatio, that harm requires a consecutive sentence, and only a consecutive sentence would be necessary to punish the offender. If the defendant is given the opportunity for parole, if he is given a life tail, 15 years to life, that would be, in essence, a life sentence for the victim. Because starting at when she's 23 years old, and at that point will fully understand what was done to her. She will have to, every few years, endure being forced back into this trauma, choosing to either go in front of the parole board and explain what was done to her, or not going and risk him getting out. These rapes occurred over a period of 2 years. They were part of a course of conduct that lasted for 2 years. And the state believes that the defendant with this conduct has forfeited his right to be among free society ever. And so at this point, the state would request that the court impose a maximum consecutive sentence on the 3 rape counts of life without parole, served consecutive to each other, and served consecutive to a sentence imposed for the pandering obscenity charge. Thank you.
Trying to figure out why you think you had the right to do that to a girl who was 4 and 5 years old. And the only person who can answer that question is you. But, as with Ms. Wehagen, you don't have any desire to talk about this stuff. I've considered all the provisions of 29, 2911, 29, 2912, 29, 2913, and 29, 2914. I've reviewed the sentencing memorandum, the letter from the defendant's mother, the psychological report provided in mitigation, the victim impact statement, consider the contents of the pre-sentence report, most specifically the defendant's statements or lack thereof in the pre-sentence report. This notion of taking responsibility is a curious notion that I hear every day. And while you say that you've taken responsibility because you've pled guilty, you haven't taken responsibility for anything. You'll never take responsibility for anything. On the 24 case, I sentence you to a definite minimum of 8 years up to an indefinite maximum of 12 years in prison with credit for 115 days. On the 23 case on count 1, I'm going to sentence you to a term of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Count 2, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Count 3, life in prison without the possibility of parole, with credit for 471 days. Those sentences will be consecutive to one another. And that sentence will also be consecutive to the 24 case. And there's never been a case that I've had where this has been more appropriate. Consecutive sentences are necessary to protect the public from future crime by you and for the appropriate punishment for what you did to this young girl, and they are not disproportionate to the seriousness of your conduct and the danger that you pose to the public. All of these offenses were committed as part of a course of conduct, and the harm caused by these multiple violations of this young girl was so great or unusual that no single prison sentence for the offenses adequately reflects the seriousness of your conduct. So your goal was to get out in 15 years so you could enjoy life. So you could enjoy life. You don't give a damn about that girl, okay? Because she ain't enjoying it. She's not enjoying reliving what you did to her every day over the period of 2 years, but you don't really give a shit about that. You just care about you. You don't take responsibility for anything. Remaining counts are dismissed. Anything further, Ms. Hronik? If there are devices to be forfeited, they are forfeited to the state.
Thank you, Your Honor. Nothing further.
Ms. Regazione, anything else?
No, Your Honor.